I took a 10-hour bus ride, carrying a $1,500 wedding gift, only to hear my daughter-in-law announce, "We got married yesterday, Mom. We only invited the special people." I had slaved away to buy them that $800,000 apartment. I was their personal bank, and now I was the uninvited guest. They wanted to declare me incompetent and drain my bank account dry. But that betrayal was child's play. The real shocker was the thick folder on the desk. Guardianship plan, drafted 2 months ago before the wedding. What they didn't know, I held the ultimate weapon that would blow their whole terrifying scheme wide open. Could a 68-year-old mother flip this desperate game? And was my son just a victim or a willing accomplice from the start? If you've ever felt exploited or believe justice must be served, subscribe right now. Join us so no mother has to fight alone. Comment justice. Because every action you take affirms that greed should never win over humanity. The truth began that autumn afternoon, when I took the 10-hour bus from Ohio to Manhattan, my heart fluttering with my $250 dusty blue dress and the $1,500 gift. I was on my way to my son's wedding, a wedding I didn't know had taken place yesterday. Walking into the $800,000 apartment I bought them, I wasn't greeted by a wedding. It was a post-wedding celebration. Sarah's parents raising champagne glasses next to a perfectly intact wedding cake. Sarah looked straight into my eyes with an icy smile. "Oh, we got married yesterday, Mom. We only invited the special people." "Don't worry too much about any paperwork or legal matters," Sarah said confidently. "Back in Arizona, I helped a relative handle her entire estate without even going to court. I'm experienced with this." "Oh, and," she added, her voice sickly sweet, "we'll have a big party after our Bali honeymoon. Maybe, if your health is stable, we might arrange it." That comment felt like a slap. If your health is stable, when I was perfectly healthy, it was a clear, subtle threat. As she spoke those lies, my gaze fell across the desk and stopped on a thick file with bold print. Guardianship plan, Emily Thompson. Drafted 2 months ago. That's when I understood. They had planned to eliminate me before the wedding. A memory flashed, sharp as a knife. Sarah had once boasted about a relative in Arizona. She claimed she helped handle their entire estate without even going to court. Back then, I thought it was tasteless bragging. Now, it echoed in my head as a disguised confession, a chilling clue she had carelessly exposed. All those horrifying pieces of the puzzle collapsed onto me at once. I turned to Evan, trying to find something in his eyes, remorse, an explanation, anything. But he just hung his head, refusing to meet my gaze. His hands were clenched until they were bruised, his body frozen solid. That look wasn't the pride of a groom. It was the shame and cowardice of a culprit awaiting sentence. Was he just deceived, or was he an accomplice? That question stabbed my heart, more painful than any knife. I, who had paid for everything over the past 4 years. The New York apartment, the furniture, the fully stocked fridge. In the apartment I bought, I stood motionless, gripping my handbag until my knuckles were white. My heels felt glued to the cold wooden floor. In front of me, Sarah's parents raised wine glasses. Her siblings laughed loudly about the wedding, an event where I only existed as a deleted memory. I looked at the apartment I had purchased. Every corner was marked by my sacrifice. But now, it was completely a stranger's home. Sarah leaned back on the sofa I worked hard to pay off, her eyes sweeping over me like I was an invisible ghost. The light blue dress I carried in my backpack lay forgotten, next to brand new shoes and the dream of being in my son's important wedding photos I would never be in. I spent $250 on that dress, imagining myself radiant in Evan's wedding album. On the flight back, I cried. Not sad tears, but a lava flow of long-suppressed rage and shame, erupting like from a seemingly extinct volcano. It poured out against my will. The surrounding passengers probably thought I was heartbroken. But my heart wasn't broken by love. It bled from betrayal. I cried for the naive woman who had lost herself, trying to be necessary in the eyes of those who saw her only as an ATM. Back home, silence enveloped me, like a layer of ice. Memories of canceling my own plans, of meager meals so they could have their luxurious weekends, played back like a pathetic drama where I was the most naive actress. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I looked in the mirror, into eyes etched with lines of innocence. But something had changed. A hardness I'd never seen sparkled behind the fog of trauma, like steel forged in fire. The phone shattered the silence. Sarah. When I answered, her voice shrieked, tearing through the peace without a greeting. Mom, where's the car payment? The bank is going to repossess the car. You have to transfer the money now. My voice was calm, flat, without a ripple. I already told you, I only help special people. Are you kidding me? Her voice became piercing. This is your responsibility. You co-signed. Then this is when you learn to take responsibility. A furious silence erupted on the other end, followed by a deafening click. I put the phone down, my palms slightly damp, but my breathing strangely deep and even. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared. This new strength was cold and resolute, like Ohio ground frozen in winter, hard, clear, and unassailable. That contrast reminded me of the weeks I spent planning the wedding. I saved $1,500 for the wedding cookware, carrying the will, a promise to my husband to raise Evan right. I dreamed of standing by Evan, giving a speech, proudly showing his photo to my friends. I called my sister in Chicago, excitedly sharing the news, cleaning my house from kitchen to porch, thinking they might stop by after the wedding. All of it collapsed in an instant with those 4 words, sharp as a knife. Only the special people. Evan looked up, his voice fumbling like reading a clumsy script. Mom, it was just a small, intimate ceremony, just the 2 of us and the witnesses. But I knew he was lying. I scrolled through Instagram. Sarah's parents standing proudly with the bride and groom, her siblings raising champagne under the Manhattan restaurant lights. Sarah's gorgeous white dress, the one I'd inadvertently contributed $1,000 for her personal expenses last month, seemed to be laughing at me. The stale coffee smell hit me right after the family party. I took a deep breath, my voice calm like the sound of dry leaves falling. My golden years are getting tough, I said, looking at Sarah, then at Evan. Maybe I should just move in with you 2 so we can conveniently take care of each other. Sarah went instantly pale, shooting Evan a desperate, silent plea. We need our privacy, Emily, she snapped, her voice trembling but firm. Evan mumbled a quick, Mom, we can handle ourselves. His words felt like an ice shard hitting my heart, but I swallowed the pain. My dignity kept me standing tall. I pulled the will from my purse, my hand shaking slightly, but my voice rang out clearly. When your father passed, I promised him I'd take care of you until my last breath. I paused, the memory shattering like thin glass. I planned to transfer everything to you after the wedding. This will, the $800,000 New York apartment, the $1.2 million stock portfolio, the $150,000 savings, all going into Evan's name. Their eyes lit up. Sarah's parents nodded approvingly. Sarah smiled sweetly. Evan whispered, Thank you, Mom. But I stared right through them, my voice as cold as frozen Ohio soil. I poured my entire life into you, and in return, I was barred from the wedding and treated like trash. Then, with a resolve as hard as granite, I ripped the will into pieces. The paper fluttered down like autumn leaves. Evan lunged forward, his face twisted. Mom, why did you do that? Sarah started fake sobbing. You're like a mother to me. But her tears dried up instantly. A cold, victorious smile spread across her face. She raised her phone. Mom, her voice was smug and triumphant. Did you know I've been recording video since you walked in? She flipped the screen toward me, a cleverly edited clip that made me look like I was screaming hysterically. Our lawyer says this is the perfect evidence for the incompetence claim. Thanks for the help, Mom. The room went silent. Evan kept his head down, unable to look at me. My chest tightened, my heart pounding against my ribs. I took a deep, deliberate breath, letting the cold air flood my lungs, dragging the necessary calm with it. My gut told me something was off the moment I walked in. I had secretly hit record on my phone's voice memo app. That proactive move was now my only defense. I pulled my phone out. The screen glowed with the red microphone icon. Sarah, I said, my voice colder than hers. Did you know I've been recording everything since the beginning too? Including your confession about the wedding yesterday and your guardianship plan from 2 months ago. I switched tabs on my phone. But maybe you forgot about this. I continued. An email you sent to a lawyer named Bennett, which you thought was buried in my spam folder 3 weeks ago. I had to look really hard to find it. I have proof you hired lawyer Bennett for $5,000 to set up the guardianship. In this email, you admit I was completely sane, and you asked for persuasive medical evidence. You even offered $2,000 cash to Dr. Norton for fake testimony." Sarah's face went white. Evan stared at his wife, his eyes wide. You were recording video? And you hired a lawyer to sue Mom for incompetence? You never told me this." His voice shook, realizing he might have been played. Sarah glared at Evan, her eyes sharp as daggers. "Shut up, Evan." That's when I saw it. My son might not have known Sarah's entire scheme, but he chose to stand by her instead of his mother. And that was unforgivable. Sarah's parents whispered frantically, "She's crazy." I walked out, straight to the waiting limousine I'd pre-booked. They chased after me, Evan screaming, "Mom, stop!" and Sarah pleading. But I got in, the door slammed shut, and I flew back to Ohio on a business class ticket, thinking, I don't have to suffer anymore. Less than a week later, Sarah's voice on the phone had changed. No more fake sweetness or simple anger, just genuine desperation. "Emily, it's me." Her voice choked, almost hysterical. "You have to help me this one time. The bank, they won't give us any more extensions. They're repossessing the car today if I don't pay. It's only $1,600. Can you just wire the money now? Please, Mom." I listened in silence, feeling the rising panic in every word. It didn't soften me. Instead, it solidified my resolve. "Sarah," I said, my tone flat but every word razor sharp. I was very clear. "You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now it's my turn to choose, and my choice is no." A near-insane shriek sounded on the other end before she hung up. I put the phone down, my palm dry and my mind completely calm. They didn't just want my money, they wanted me to take responsibility for their own bad choices. And I refused. I made coffee in the kitchen, the bubbling water a rhythm of life returning. This time, I didn't think about calling Evan. I didn't check my phone for a pathetic apology text. For the first time in so long, I was my own first priority. Days passed in rare silence. When my mind was clear, I sat down at the dining table, the place where I used to plan for them, quietly weeping when they ignored me. Now it witnessed a different moment. I spread out all 4 years of bank statements. Every single piece of paper was a lie, an act of exploitation. I didn't just calculate. I wrote it all down on a clean sheet with a strong, decisive hand. 4 years of money poured into their lives. $38,400 for the apartment, $14,000 for groceries, $4,000 for gifts and personal expenses, $3,100 for car debt and repairs, and thousands more for endless emergencies. When I added it all up, the final number stunned me. $45,100. I stared at that number. It wasn't just money anymore. It was 4 years of my life. It was the canceled European trips, the abandoned painting classes, the peace I should have had. The paper wasn't just a list of numbers. It was the verdict on my own naivety. And I thought that $40,100 was the peak of their betrayal. But I was wrong. The real storm was just beginning. The next morning, the bank called. "Mrs. Thompson, about the $15,000 loan you co-signed for Sarah Brooks last month." I didn't sign anything. I cut in, my voice trembling. At the bank office, the employee handed me a photocopy. The signature on it was identical to mine. Down to every curve of the E, the way I draw the slightly extended tail on the N in Thompson. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed it was mine. "She practiced," I whispered, staring at the page. How long did Sarah practice to forge that signature? The signature was terrifyingly accurate. This wasn't some clumsy amateur job. This was the skill of someone who had practiced, who had done this many times before. But the forgery wasn't even the most spine-chilling part. It was when the bank employee showed me the security camera footage. The person who came to the bank wasn't Sarah. It was a silver-haired woman about 65, dressed exactly in my style, a beige cardigan and a floral scarf. She even wore glasses identical to mine. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thompson," the employee said, his voice shaking. "We thought it was you. She impersonated you perfectly." Sarah hadn't just forged my signature. She had hired someone to play me. Sarah had no limits. One haunting thought struck me. If she could stage a performance this elaborate, what had she done to manipulate Evan, my own son? Was he truly a victim, or did he know everything from the start? The answer would come in the courtroom, where every secret would be exposed. Soon after, I uncovered 2 additional credit cards and another personal loan. The total debt under my name, $62,000. Sarah wasn't just stealing my money, she had built an entire criminal network. My phone rang. Evan's name flashed. Normally, I would rush to answer, hoping for an apology. This time, I let it ring, then deleted the text. "Mom, answer me." I sipped my coffee, the bitterness spreading. Sarah called. I ignored her too. That afternoon, I took a walk in the suburb air, past the park where Evan once called me the best mom in the world. When did I become an ATM? When did I start believing I had to buy my son's affection? I stopped outside the bank, the place where I had made those transfers like clockwork. Mr. Harris, the branch manager, saw me through the glass and waved. I walked straight into his office. "Mr. Harris, I need to cancel all automatic transfers," I said, my voice as firm as a nail being driven in. He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "For 4 years, those transfers have been as regular as the suburb morning sun. Are you sure, Mrs. Thompson? Is something wrong?" His concern was more genuine than any inquiry I'd received from Evan lately. My response was flat, like a calm lake surface. "What's wrong is that I've finally woken up. I want them canceled, and I need a way to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else touching my money." While Mr. Harris processed the paperwork, my phone vibrated nonstop. Evan, Sarah, Evan again. It was as if they had a radar for their diminishing cash flow. I powered it off. The sudden silence was my declaration. Mr. Harris handed me the papers, his voice gentle. "Mrs. Thompson, I apologize for intruding, but over the years, I've seen how generous you've been with your family. Do they understand that? I hope no one is pressuring you into these changes." Mr. Harris's words resonated deeply. This man, who only knew me through cold bank transfers, was more genuinely worried about me than the son I bore. "No one is pressuring me, Mr. Harris," I replied. My voice light but final, like the click of a locked door. I just finally stopped torturing myself. Leaving the bank, I walked the suburban sidewalk, the warm afternoon sun casting a golden light through the white picket fences. My heart felt light, like a bird escaping a gilded cage. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine. Back in my small home, I sipped my coffee, the resolve inside me cold and steady as Ohio ground in the winter. Immediately, I called Linda, the realtor. "Mrs. Thompson, you want to sell the New York apartment?" She sounded stunned. My voice was a hammer blow. "Yes." We quickly discussed the price and procedure. When Linda said, "It will take a few weeks to find a buyer and close," I nodded, already visualizing Evan and Sarah's panic. The storm hit right on schedule. My phone rang incessantly. Evan's shaky voicemails, "Mom, you can't sell the apartment. We'll be homeless." I let the calls go, the dark screen reflecting the calm that had returned to my soul. In desperation, Evan tried sending messages through my neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn, but I had warned her, "If they ask, tell them I'm traveling." Mrs. Evelyn nodded, her eyes twinkling with understanding. They didn't stop there. Evan called the whole extended family, spreading the word. "Mom abandoned us. She's selfish. She's cruel." He posted an angry rant on social media. My mother turned her back on her family and took everything. Relatives called, the accusations raining down. "How could you do that to your son?" My only reply, my voice flat as a winter Ohio lake, "They only know half the story." Weeks later, Linda's assistant, Lisa, recounted the scene when the new buyer moved in. Evan and Sarah stood blankly outside the apartment. Sarah's eyes were red, Evan's head bowed, as if their entire world had collapsed. They quickly rented a small, cramped apartment, far from the Manhattan lights, a place that used to be the dream I spent my life building for them. That afternoon, I decided to go out, visiting an old familiar suburb coffee shop I'd long neglected. I needed to live for myself now. On my way home, walking slowly down the sidewalk, I thought of the things I'd missed to please Evan and Sarah. The canceled European trips, the painting classes I'd stopped because every dollar spent on supplies was $1 less for them. Lost in thought, I jumped when I saw a black SUV parked in my driveway. Through the window, shadows moved in the living room. My heart seized up. The world went silent except for the frantic drum in my chest. They still had the key. I had given it, trusting them to look after me as I looked after them. I clenched my fists, inhaling the smell of freshly cut grass before pushing the door open. The hinges screamed a warning. It was time for a confrontation. The door swung open, the hinges protesting loudly. Evan was bent over the filing cabinet near my sofa, his hands shaking as if afraid of being caught. Sarah was tearing through papers on the kitchen table, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. A strange man, about 50, was flipping through documents on the dining table. My bank statements, bills, and my old will. All three froze, spinning around, their eyes wide and panicked like cornered animals. "Who gave you permission to touch my things?" I asked, my voice ringing like a suburb church bell. Sarah spoke first, her voice frantic and shrill like her car loan calls. "Mom, how could you sell the apartment?" she shrieked, pointing at me. "Now we have to live in a cramped birdcage an hour from Manhattan. Do you have any idea how that feels?" I didn't move. My voice was flat, but every word was razor sharp. "How I feel? I'm healthy. I'm lucid. Perhaps you are the ones losing your grip on reality." Evan stepped towards me, still clutching a piece of paper from the drawer. His eyes darted away, fixed on the floor. His voice was small, choked with conflicting accusations and weak pleading. "Mom, you canceled the transfers. You sold our apartment. How could you? Why would you do this to us?" For a second, I saw a flicker of genuine conflict in his eyes, a tiny spark of shame, but it was quickly drowned out by the fog of disappointment and financial panic. Then, as if the lie was strangling itself, Evan turned to Sarah, his voice trembling and full of panic. "Sarah, maybe we should stop? This is too wrong." Sarah immediately spun around, her eyes sharp as daggers, and snapped, "Shut up, Evan. Your mother is unstable. We have to do this." Mr. Bennett, wearing a light gray suit, stepped out from the corner with a fake smile, like a used car salesman. He extended his hand with an elaborately staged friendly gesture. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Bennett, the lawyer. We're reviewing documents because your children are concerned about your mental health." I left his hand hanging in the air. It wasn't worth my touch. I rushed to the dining table, snatching the pile of papers he was secretly flipping through. The paper rustled like dry leaves underfoot. "These are my private documents, including the Thompson Trust I have protected for years. You are not allowed to touch them without my consent." Evan cut in, his voice still shaky, but trying to assert authority. "Mom, don't you see how different you're acting? Cutting off all the money, suddenly selling the house, not answering the phone. Sarah and I are genuinely worried. Maybe you should go talk to someone?" Sarah advanced, trying to take my hand with a false, gentle gesture, her strong perfume hitting my nose. "Dear Mom, we know you're stressed. You kicked us out of the house and now we're struggling. Loneliness at your age can easily confuse you. At your age, confusion is common." The word confusion hit my mind like shattering glass, sharp and overwhelming. I understood. They wanted to declare me incompetent to seize control of my assets, from the Thompson Trust to the money from the sold apartment. How prepared were they for this ploy? "I am not incompetent," I said, my voice so hard the whole room fell silent, the ticking clock sounding like my slow, steady heartbeat. Anger flared in my chest like fire. I grabbed my phone and immediately called Evelyn, my neighbor, and Carl, the neighborhood watch representative. "I have people trespassing in my house," I said, my voice sharp as Ohio slate rock in the rain. Less than 5 minutes later, Evelyn and Carl walked in, their faces stern. Evelyn, hands on her hips, demanded, "What are you doing in Emily's house without permission?" Carl, a former policeman, checked the door, shaking his head. "Unlawful entry without consent is a violation. I will call the police for trespassing if you don't leave immediately." Evan, Sarah, and Bennett turned pale, backing away like cornered wild animals. Bennett quickly gathered his papers, mumbling, "We will return with a court order." Sarah, red-eyed, screamed, "You'll regret kicking us out." Evan was silent, but his eyes were sharp and cold, promising a war that wasn't over. "Get out!" I pointed to the door, my keys jingling. "All three of you, get out of my house." Bennett pulled a file from his leather briefcase and slammed it onto the table, the thud sounding like a challenge. "Mrs. Thompson, we drafted some paperwork to make this easier, a power of attorney allowing Evan and Sarah to manage your finances, including the Thompson Trust. Only temporarily, until you are more stable." I snatched the folder without opening it, throwing it straight into the trash can. The impact sounded like a gunshot in the fog. "The only transfer happening here is all of you walking out the front door immediately." Sarah started to cry. But they weren't real tears. They were tears of sheer frustration, rolling down her face under the yellow light. You can't do this to us. We depended on you. We bought things, took on debt, knowing you were there. You sold the house. You cast us out. The debt was based on my money, I replied, my voice cold as late autumn Ohio ice. Not on my happiness, not on my health, not on my presence, just my money. And now that I choose to use that money for myself, I suddenly become the senile old woman who needs a guardian? Evan stepped toward me, but I retreated, my back hitting the cool wooden wall. He was no longer the little boy I comforted during nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle. Mom, we were wrong, he said, his voice a cheap, feigned apology. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Sarah was stressed, I was pressured. We can fix this if you just go back to normal. Normal? The word was bitter, like stale, cold coffee. Normal is continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like ashes? I am no longer buying your love, Evan. Bennett zipped his briefcase shut with a final snap. Mrs. Thompson, this is not over. Selling the apartment and cutting off financial support are signs of mental instability. If you make irrational decisions, a judge can mandate guardianship. His words swept over my chest like a blizzard. My heart pounded in its narrow cage. Evelyn held my hand, whispering, "You did the right thing, Emily. Don't let them bully you." Carl nodded, checked the window, and reminded me to check the security camera. I looked Bennett straight in the eye, my gaze narrowing in the fading sunlight through the curtains. "Mr. Bennett, I advise you to check your facts before you threaten me. I have managed my finances flawlessly for 40 years. I raised my son alone after my husband's death. No one has the right to question my sanity." Sarah stopped crying, looking at me with cold eyes, like a hungry wolf under the moon. "This won't stand, Mom. We have rights and a lawyer, too." "Good," I replied, my voice light but hard as Ohio rock in the rain. "Hire a lawyer with your own money. Mine will no longer pay for your legal theatrics." All three scrambled into the black SUV. The engine roared a final threat, then vanished down the quiet suburban street. They trudged out the door, their steps heavy on the hardwood floor, like defeated foes unused to rejection. Before leaving, Evan turned back, his face distorted under the porch light. "Mom, this will end badly for you. You'll be lost, with no one to care for you when you need it." "Evan," I said, sadness deep like suburban rain, but my voice as steady as the white fence outside. "I've been lost for a long time. Now I choose this, not because you abandoned me." The door closed, the lock clicking like a declaration of victory. I stood in the living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had ever heard. No phone ringing, no fake pleas. It was the breath of freedom, like waves washing up on the Ohio shore. I checked the security camera. The screen flickered in the corner, recording every second of their rummaging, their threats, and Carl's warning about trespassing. If things went smoothly, I wouldn't use it, but I knew to keep it safe. That night, I tossed and turned, not from regret, but from the hot blood surging from reclaiming my life. Tomorrow I would call a lawyer to protect the Thompson Trust and my remaining assets, or tell my sister in Chicago for support. Or perhaps I would book that ticket to Paris, the European trip I'd put off for too long, and live for myself, as the suburban sunshine had once promised. I lay in bed, the suburban moonlight streaming through the curtains onto the ceiling, my mind spinning like a general planning a battle. If Evan and Sarah wanted a fight, I would give them one, but a battle of wits, not emotions. Early the next morning, as the Ohio sun emerged, I was dressed in my sweater, holding a hot cup of coffee, and in my car. First stop, the lawyer's office. I called Mr. Harlan, the man I knew from handling my husband's will. Unlike the shady Bennett, Mr. Harlan was known for his integrity and specializing in protecting the rights of the elderly. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Harlan said, his voice deep as old wood, as I recounted the break-in and rummaging yesterday. "What your children did is quite common. It's called elder financial abuse, a federal crime. Their unauthorized entry and going through your private papers also violate the law." His words were both reassuring and chilling. Reassuring because I wasn't crazy. What happened was real abuse. Chilling because the situation was more serious than I thought. How far would they go to seize control of the Thompson Trust? "We must document everything," Mr. Harlan continued, tapping gently on his oak desk. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We also need to change your will to protect the Thompson Trust and your assets from future schemes. We spent 3 hours reviewing the financial records. Mr. Harlan whistled softly when he saw the total. Over $45,000 in 4 years. Mrs. Thompson, with that amount of money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed retirement. Instead, you fully supported 2 adults who couldn't even invite you to their wedding. Leaving Mr. Harlan's office, I carried a plan as clear as the suburban sunshine. 1. Replace all the locks. 2. Install a full security camera system to deter unexpected visits. 3. Open a new account at a different bank where they had no information. And 4. Start living the life I had postponed for too long, like the Paris plane ticket I'd put aside. I drove to the hardware store, the smell of metal and fresh-cut wood hitting my nose. The owner, Mr. Ellis, knew me from all the times I bought repair supplies for Evan and Sarah's place. "Mrs. Thompson, what's up today? Another emergency for your son?" he asked, his familiar voice acknowledging the years of my wasteful generosity. "No, Mr. Ellis. This time it's for my house. I need to replace all the locks, the best kind you have." He looked at me, eyes wide, but didn't ask further, just nodded. After selecting the best locks, I asked Mr. Ellis, "Mr. Ellis, I need to install a comprehensive security camera system. Do you know anyone trustworthy?" Mr. Ellis scratched his chin for a moment, then nodded. "Let me call my son, Tyler. He specializes in this." And just then, Tyler walked into the store like perfect timing. "Tyler," I said, my voice firm as a hammer blow, "I need a full security camera system installed. Price is not an issue." Mr. Ellis's pen scratching on paper sounded like the count of my new freedom. While I was standing there, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. It was Sarah, calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after yesterday's confrontation. "Mom, it's me. Please don't hang up," she said, her voice falsely sweet like cheap perfume. "I know you're upset about the wedding. It was our fault. Evan and I talked, and we want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner to celebrate the wedding with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The blatant artificiality made me grip the phone tightly, like a rock in the Ohio rain. "Sarah, how many months behind are you on the car payment?" I asked, my voice dry as drought-stricken Ohio soil. The silence on the line was a confession. Well, 2 months, a total of $1,600, but I didn't just call for that, Mom. We genuinely miss you." "Do you really miss me, or do you miss my money?" I asked directly, the sound of a passing truck echoing. Sarah stammered, trying to sound honest, but cracking like fragile glass. "Both, Mom. We need the money, yes, but we love you too. You are important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be invited to the wedding? Why wasn't I important enough to get a call that didn't involve asking for money? When was the last time either of you called just to ask how I was doing?" Silence again. They both knew the answer. Never. "Sarah, I'll say this once. For the past 4 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You've used me, ignored me, and humiliated me in the worst way. Now that the money is drying up, you suddenly discover you love me." "Mom, please," she pleaded, but I cut her off. "There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to attend the wedding. Now it's my turn to choose." I hung up and powered off the phone. The silence was my declaration. It was my liberation day, like a breeze of freedom blowing through the suburban window. That afternoon, I went to the salon, a place I hadn't visited all year because I always canceled appointments to handle emergencies, like Evan or Sarah's car payments. "Mrs. Thompson." Jenna, my favorite hairdresser, exclaimed, her voice cheerful as a wind chime. "What a surprise, I thought you'd forgotten about us." "I haven't forgotten you, Jenna," I replied, my voice light as the suburban sun. "I just forgot that I also deserve to be taken care of." I treated myself to the full works: cut, color, manicure, and pedicure. It felt like a fresh, cool breeze of freedom. While Jenna was trimming my hair, she talked about her life, her children, her dreams, a conversation that didn't revolve around Evan and Sarah's needs. When she finished, she looked at me in the mirror and smiled. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Thompson. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes, Jenna," I replied, my voice as firm as the new locks. "I learned how to say no." Returning home that afternoon, I saw a strange car parked in the driveway, my heart racing as if I'd heard a distant siren. Had Evan and Sarah come back with a new tactic? But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps, her silver hair shimmering in the sun. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked as I stepped out of the car. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "I'm Evelyn Hayes, your next-door neighbor. We've lived here for years and never properly talked. Yesterday, I heard a lot of noise from your house and I was worried. Are you okay?" Her genuine concern touched me, like a hot cup of coffee on a cold winter day. "Please come in, Mrs. Hayes," I said. I made coffee, then told her the unbelievable story, from the secret wedding and the humiliation to the break-in, the lawyer, and the trespassing threat. Evelyn listened, nodding occasionally, her eyes moist when I finished. "Mrs. Thompson, you did the right thing," she said, her voice warm as a suburban fireplace. "But I have to warn you, this is more dangerous than you think." Evelyn took a deep breath, her eyes brimming with tears. 5 years ago, my daughter sued me for incompetence, and she won. I was confined to a nursing home for 8 months. No going out, no phone use. She drained my entire life savings of $160,000. She gripped my hand, her voice low and cautionary. "Emily, do you know? In the US, 1 in every 10 people over 60 is a victim of financial abuse, and the perpetrator in 90% of those cases is a family member. That's exactly what Sarah is doing to you." "The first step up of any abuser," she said, her eyes fixed on mine, "is to make the victim feel like they deserve it. And you know the worst part? Many people don't even realize they're being abused. They think it's helping family, it's a parent's duty, until it's too late." She pulled a small piece of paper from her pocket. "This is the National Hotline for Elder Abuse, 1-800-677-1116. I wish I had known it 5 years ago." "I was saved by a kind nurse," Evelyn continued. "She realized I wasn't sick and secretly recorded my daughter bribing the doctor. But Emily, if not for her, I would still be locked up. Or worse." She looked me straight in the eye, her sincerity overflowing. "That's why I have to help you. Because not everyone is lucky enough to have someone save them like I did." "Like you," I whispered. "I also thought I had to fund my adult son's life, that he wouldn't love me if I didn't give him money." "And then what happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I cut off the money when I realized he only called when he needed something. It was awful at first. He threatened, played emotional games, and made me feel guilty. But after 6 months, he called with a genuine apology. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money." Her words lit a spark of hope, like a porch light in the dark. Could Evan and Sarah truly come to their senses? "Maybe, maybe not," Mrs. Hayes replied, her voice as direct and clear as the numbers on a bank statement. "But that is no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Thompson. Your responsibility now is to live for yourself." The next morning, Tyler and Mr. Ellis arrived at 8 a.m. to replace the locks and install the cameras. While they worked, the sound of the drilling resonated like the rhythm of freedom, and my phone vibrated constantly with calls from an unknown number. Sarah was still trying to reach me from a different phone, but I ignored her, like a wave washing away footprints on the Ohio shore. "Mrs. Thompson," Tyler said, "this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see who is at your house on your phone, even when you're not here. If anyone intrudes, the police will be notified immediately." I laughed at the irony, installing a camera to protect myself from my own son, like the white suburban fence shielding me from a storm. But as night fell, that peace of mind evaporated. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of a scenario. What if Sarah had bribed someone else? A witness? A court official? I knew it sounded paranoid. But after everything Sarah had done, forging signatures, hiring an impersonator, I no longer knew where her boundary was. Mr. Harlan had warned me, in guardianship cases, judges often trust the younger person. They think, why would children want to harm their own parent? The burden of proof is on us. We have to prove you are not crazy. They don't have to prove you are. And if I lost, I would be confined to a nursing home. Just like Evelyn. But no one would save me because everyone would believe I was truly insane. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into the courtroom. It would be the day of decision, freedom or a prison without bars. While they worked, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Diana in Chicago. We had drifted apart because every time we talked, I only bragged about Evan and Sarah, about the money I gave them, as if family love was measured in dollars. Emily, Diana answered, her voice sounding surprised, like a wind chime. Sis, how are you? Long time no talk. I'm fine, Diana, more than fine. I told her everything from the beginning, the secret wedding, the humiliation, the break-in, the decision to cut off support, the act of living for myself. Diana listened, silent until the end. Then she spoke, her voice breaking. Emily, you finally woke up. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love was a number. What did you say? I asked, my heart pounding like a distant siren. That Evan never spoke about you with affection when I saw him at family gatherings. He only bragged about the apartment, the car, as if you were a sponsor, not a mother. Diana's words were like a knife cutting through fog, painful but confirming what I had suspected. I didn't cry, I just took a deep breath, the feeling of freedom outweighing the pain. Sister, I'm living for myself, I said, my voice as steady as a rock, and I won't stop. The door closed, the new lock clicking like a final affirmation. I thought about the plane ticket to Paris, the days no longer bound by Evan and Sarah, the life I was reclaiming, like a new piece of music played after a long, drawn-out minor key. My sister Diana continued, her voice low like the wind through the trees in her Chicago yard. It was always, Mom helped us with this, Mom bought us that, but never I miss Mom or I love Mom, as if you were just a service provider, not a human being. Her words stung, but it was a necessary pain, like when a doctor cleans an infected wound. It hurts, but it's a step toward healing. What else did you notice? I asked, my heart tightening. Sarah spoke about you like a person about to leave. When Emily is gone, we'll fix up her house. Or when we inherit the Thompson Trust, we'll start a company. As if they were just waiting for you to die to get the money. That statement was like a bucket of cold water dumped on me, chilling me to the bone in my suburban Ohio kitchen. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle before the $800,000 from the New York apartment and the Thompson Trust. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning a future without me. After the call with Diana, I sat silently at the dining table, the smell of cold coffee lingering, my resolve firmer than ever. The doorbell rang, and the newly installed camera screen showed Mrs. Evelyn holding a steaming cup of coffee. I opened the door. She handed me the cup. The warm aroma chased away the cold in my heart. I thought you could use some company after the break-in yesterday, she said, her smile as genuine as the suburban sunshine. We sat in the living room, the armchair creaking softly. Mrs. Evelyn talked about her own experience. My daughter used to say exactly what Sarah said to you. You're my second mother. We're special to you. Everything you have will be yours anyway. Those words sound like they're from a manual on emotional manipulation. Is there really a manual? I asked half-jokingly, the yellow light shining on her face. There isn't, but everyone seems to know it by heart, she replied. Chapter 1, Make Mom Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2, Create Constant Financial Crises, like Sarah's car payments. Chapter 3, When Mom Resists, Question Her Mental Health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, like dry leaves scattering in the suburban wind. Did you ever feel guilty about cutting off the money? I asked, my voice slightly shaky. For the first 3 months, every day, Mrs. Evelyn replied, her eyes distant as if recalling a cold suburban wind. But then I saw the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped weekend golf and took on extra work. They learned to live within their means. More importantly, they realized I was a human being, not a money source. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had put off for years, visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go. Evan needed a car payment, Sarah needed cosmetics or taxi money for their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet, the grass green under the Ohio sun. Robert's grave was a bit neglected because I hadn't visited in a month. I sat on the grass, my hand touching the cool tombstone. Robert, my love. I think I lost myself for a while, I whispered, as if he could hear me. After you left, I poured all my energy into Evan, wanting to be the best mother, to compensate for him not having a father. But I forgot myself, spending the money you left me on them, from the New York apartment to the Thompson Trust. A gentle breeze blew through, as if he was answering. the rustling leaves serene. Our son became a person I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it. And Sarah, you know what she's like. The money you left for my peaceful life, I spent on them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned now. I'll live for myself, like the Paris trip I always dreamed of. I tidied the grave, replaced the withered flowers with a fresh bouquet of chrysanthemums, and sat for another hour, enjoying the stillness without having to rush off to Evan or Sarah's crisis. Returning home, I saw 3 cars parked in the driveway. My heart pounded like a distant siren. The camera showed Evan, Sarah, and 2 strangers talking excitedly, pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car, my hand trembling as I dialed Mr. Harlan's number. Mr. Harlan, they are back at my house, and this time they brought more people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Thompson, he said, his voice firm as a hammer blow. I'm coming right away and will call the police. After the break-in and trespassing yesterday, I secured a temporary restraining order. They are not allowed near your house. A few minutes later, Mr. Harlan and 2 police cars appeared, their red and blue lights flashing under the suburban afternoon sun. I watched the police talk to Evan and Sarah. Evan angrily waved his arms. Sarah cried again, but this time her tears didn't move me. They were like cold, spent ashes. A police officer approached my car. Ma'am, you can safely get out. Those guests will be leaving immediately. The legal 100-yard restraining order made me sigh with relief, like a white suburban fence protecting me. I got out and Evan shouted from across the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're family. You can't call the police on your own son. Evan, I replied. My voice as calm as a suburban lake. Family doesn't threaten to sue for incompetence. Family doesn't break into someone else's house. Family doesn't treat their mother like an ATM to pay off a $1,600 car debt. Sarah wailed from a distance, her voice shrill. You have to pay our debts. We have signed invoices. You can't abandon us like this. Mr. Harlan intervened, his voice sharp enough to cut the wind. Miss Sarah, all future contact must go through my office. I advise you to find a lawyer before demanding payment, as my client has full documentation of all voluntary support provided over the last 4 years, from the New York apartment to the car payments. I watched them drive away, defeated but not yet conceding, their tires grinding on the road like a whispered threat. I knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt confident. I had a lawyer, the support of Mrs. Evelyn, and more importantly, I was clearly in the right. The door closed and the house fell silent. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling a slight tremor in my body after the suppressed emotion. The confidence I had just gained was accompanied by a vast sadness, like a newly created void. Just then, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Evelyn stood on the porch, holding a small, hot-baked good. I thought you might need something sweet, she said, her smile genuinely kind. That's perfect timing, I replied, my voice a little choked, and I opened the door to invite her in. That evening, Mrs. Evelyn stayed for dinner. During the meal, I recounted everything. She listened intently, then gently said, Emily, you are not alone. I know a group of women. We have all been through similar things. A few days later, she took me to meet them. When I walked into Evelyn's living room, a group of women was sitting there. Jenna from the hair salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We have all been through similar things as you, Evelyn said. They shared their stories, laughter mixing with tears under the warm light. Alfreda, the oldest woman, spoke up. The most painful thing, Emily, isn't losing the money. It's realizing that the affection you thought was love was actually just a transaction. True love cannot be bought. If you have to pay for it, it was never real in the first place. Her words were like a bomb exploding in my soul, reminding me of the line I had uttered, I am not buying your love. I had bought their attention, not affection. Loneliness among people who don't love you, I said softly, is worse than being alone. Now I have good friends, and myself. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, the sound of the glass a blessing. In a subsequent meeting, I got to see Evelyn's daughter visiting, and I saw what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully, asked genuine questions, and laughed naturally. Her daughter didn't ask for money once the entire time. I want that with Evan, I confessed to Evelyn after her daughter left, my voice tinged with sadness. Perhaps one day you will, she replied, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of money. For the first time in weeks, I went to sleep with a glimmer of hope, like a twinkling porch light. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The camera showed Evan and Sarah driving past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking for a few minutes without getting out. It was as if they were scouting, waiting for their next move. Mr. Harlan told me to record every sighting, so I kept a detailed journal, date, time, license plate. Their persistence will help us, he said, his voice firm as office oak. Every time they come after being ordered to stay away, it adds evidence for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was eating breakfast, the smell of toast lingering, when the doorbell rang. The camera showed a young, well-dressed woman holding a file, with a professional, sales-like smile. I didn't recognize her, but her demeanor suggested it wasn't a social call. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson," she said when I opened the door, her voice smooth as a TV commercial. "I'm an investigator from the Office of Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you may be at risk, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My heart went cold, as if I heard a distant alarm siren. Evan and Sarah had escalated their scheme, not just a private lawyer, but now a government agency. "May I see your ID?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as calm as a suburban lake. "Of course." She presented an ID badge that looked official. "I'm Miss Schmidt, a social worker. May I come in to talk?" I let her in, knowing that refusing would look worse, but anger surged like fire beneath cold ashes. "Miss Law." Schmidt sat down in the living room, pulled out forms from her file, the paper rustling like dry leaves. "Mrs. Thompson, we received reports that you've made drastic changes in your financial behavior, cut contact with family, and show signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security cameras. We were also informed that you are refusing medical and legal assistance from your relatives." Every word she spoke was carefully chosen, as if pre-written by Sarah to make me sound like a mentally unstable elderly woman. I recognized Sarah's manipulative tone. She was always good at using words to get her way. "Miss Schmidt," I said with the same dignity I used when facing Evan, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Mrs. Thompson, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's just a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, what's the harm in talking to me?" she said, her voice smooth but sharp as a knife in the fog. That artificiality made my blood boil, like a stab wound cutting across the peaceful picture I had just painted. "Miss Schmidt," I replied, my voice hard as steel, "I will call my lawyer. I will not answer until he is present. You may wait here or come back later, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation." I dialed Mr. Harlan's number, and he arrived in just 20 minutes, the sound of his car pulling up in the driveway serving as a warning. When he walked in and saw Miss Schmidt, his face hardened like suburban oak under the Ohio sun. "Miss Schmidt," Mr. Harlan said after checking her ID, his voice sharp as a suburban wind cutter, "I hope you have a court order to be here because my client is under my legal protection, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Mr. Harlan," Miss Schmidt replied, her voice less confident, like the sound of dry leaves falling on the porch. "We received a report from concerned relatives about her health. It is our duty to check." "Which relatives?" Mr. Harlan asked, his voice dry as drought-stricken Ohio soil. "The same people who tried to pressure her into signing a power of attorney without a lawyer. The same people who broke into her home and rummaged through her private papers. The same people who excluded her from their wedding while living off her money, from the Thompson Trust to a $1,600 car debt." Mr. Harlan pulled a file from his briefcase and slapped it onto the dining table, the papers rustling like an accusation. "This is documentation of financial and emotional abuse against my client. Over $45,000 withdrawn from her accounts in 4 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If anyone needs investigating, it's not my client." Miss Schmidt flipped through the documents, her face paling under the living room light, as if realizing Sarah's manipulative narrative didn't match the reality. "Mrs. Thompson, why did you cut off your son's support?" she asked, her voice faltering like a faint Ohio breeze. "Because they were taking advantage of me," I replied, my voice steady as a suburban lake. Because to them, I wasn't a mother, I was a bank account. Because I was tired of funding people who saw me as an obstacle to the Thompson Trust and the $800,000 New York apartment. But don't you think you have a responsibility to help your family? That question made my blood boil, like an ambulance siren cutting through the suburban peace. Miss Schmidt, my responsibility was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be independent. My son is 35, married, and capable of supporting himself. Funding his adult life like his car payment debt is not a responsibility. It is a choice, and I choose not to do it anymore. Mr. Harlan interjected, his voice firm as a hammer hitting wood. Miss Schmidt, do you find it normal for a 35-year-old adult who cannot afford his car payment to depend on his 68-year-old mother? Miss Schmidt fell silent, her eyes scanning the documents, as if unraveling Evan and Sarah's web of manipulation. Mrs. Thompson, she asked, her voice softer, are you managing your finances independently? I have my bank statements, my investments, and I file my taxes. Everything is in order. Are you living independently? My house is clean. I take care of my own health, I drive myself, and I socialize with Mrs. Evelyn Hayes and my friends. What medications are you on? Only vitamins and occasional aspirin. No medical conditions requiring prescriptions. Mr. Harlan added, his voice like the click of a lock. My client just had a comprehensive medical checkup. She is perfectly sound, mentally and physically. Miss Schmidt closed her file, the sound of final dismissal. Mrs. Thompson, based on our conversation and the documentation, I see no signs of risk or need for intervention. I will close this case. After she left, Mr. Harlan and I were silent, the clock ticking like a slow heart rate. Emily, he said, his voice deep as a suburban night wind, this will escalate. Evan and Sarah are spending money they don't have to hire professionals, targeting the Thompson Trust and the apartment money. They're desperate? Exactly. What will they do next? They could file an incompetence lawsuit. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist to testify, they could be granted guardianship. The thought sent a chill down my spine, like the cold from my husband Robert's grave. They could steal my money, extinguish my freedom, like darkness overshadowing the suburban sun. That afternoon, I called Diana, the phone ringing like a Chicago wind chime. Sis, Diana said, her voice strained. Do you see how far they've gone for the money? They're gambling with family, spending money on lawyers and doctors, ruining your reputation, just to get your accounts. Her words were like suburban sunlight shining into a dark corner. Evan and Sarah had revealed their true nature. To them, I was just money with legs. Just like the, I am not buying your love I had once said. The truth was painful, but liberating, like a cool, clean stream washing away the layer of accumulated lies in my mind. They had proven that my well-being was worth less than their money. From the $1,600 car debt to the $800,000 apartment. That night, I sat in the garden, the stars sparkling, as my vision became clearer. I was financially independent, no dependency, no obligations, like the rushing Ohio River. I could travel, like the Paris ticket, fix my house, buy clothes, donate, and invest for my future. Freedom tasted like hope, like suburban sun after the rain. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought I had won. I spent mornings reading the paper and tending the garden, and afternoons having lunch with Mrs. Evelyn or my new friends. In the afternoons, I painted, my brushstrokes like the wind of freedom. But on Thursday morning, Mr. Harlan visited with a gloomy expression that made my heart clench, like a bad premonition flashing and instantly turning into harsh reality. Emily, we need to talk, he said, his voice as low as a cloud over the Ohio sun. Evan and Sarah have filed a petition for mental incompetence in family court. His words felt like a stone crushing my chest. They can take the Thompson Trust and the apartment money? If the judge determines you cannot manage your affairs, Evan could be appointed as guardian, giving him full financial control. I slumped onto the sofa, the betrayal heavy like the stifling suburban air. My son was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my money. What evidence do they have? I am perfectly lucid. They have sworn statements from 3 witnesses claiming you've been acting erratically with your medication, unpaid doctor's bills, and unused stockpiled pills. But it's all lies. I know, Emily, he replied, his voice like a locked door, but they manufactured evidence like a chain of manipulation. The statement from Dr. Norton says you refused a psychological evaluation. They are interpreting that as mental decline. The manipulation was insidious, like darkness encroaching on the suburban sun. Who are the three witnesses? Mr. Harlan flipped through the documents, the paper rustling like autumn leaves. Sarah, Mr. Vernon, your across-the-street neighbor, and Mr. Fletcher, your pharmacist. Mr. Vernon was the unpleasant man I argued with about parking in front of his house. Mr. Fletcher was my pharmacist, but I couldn't understand why he would testify against me. I need to talk to Mr. Fletcher, I told Mr. Harlan, my voice hard as forged steel, my heart pounding like an alarm siren. Something is wrong. Was he tricked or paid off to target the Thompson Trust? That afternoon, we went to the pharmacy, the smell of antiseptic and the cold neon light like suburban fog. Mr. Fletcher greeted me, his eyes filled with anxiety, like a mask falling when caught doing wrong. Mrs. Thompson, long time no see. How are you? He asked, his voice trembling like autumn leaves. Mr. Fletcher, I replied, my voice steady as a suburban lake, but sharp as a fog-cutting blade. I hear you signed a document confirming my erratic behavior regarding medication. His face flushed red like an apple ripe under the Ohio sun, his eyes darting around like a cornered wild animal. Mrs. Thompson, I only provided the information they requested. They said you weren't taking your medication properly, that you were stockpiling pills. Who requested it? Evan and Sarah? I stepped closer, my voice firm but laced with pain, like ashes flaring up in my chest. How much did they pay you to lie about me? To help them steal the Thompson Trust and the $800,000 apartment? Mr. Fletcher backed away, his hand shaking as he put a bottle of pills on the counter, the clatter a silent confession. You misunderstand, ma'am, I didn't mean to. But his eyes betrayed him, like shattered glass under the suburban sun, revealing Evan and Sarah's thread of manipulation. I turned to Mr. Harlan, my voice firm as a rock. Do we have enough to countersue yet? After the social worker's visit, I thought I had won, but Evan and Sarah filed an incompetence lawsuit targeting the Thompson Trust and the $800,000 New York apartment. Harlan listed the abuse: $45,000 withdrawn in 4 years, a break-in, exclusion from the wedding, and the $1,600 car payment debt. Diana confirmed they were gambling with family for money. Evelyn and her friends, Jenna, Maria, Carmen, Alfreda, shared abuse stories, with Alfreda saying, "True love cannot be bought." I repeated, "I am not buying love," realizing I was merely money with legs. I spent mornings gardening and afternoons painting, my brushstrokes like the wind of freedom, dreaming of the Paris ticket. But on Thursday morning, Harlan informed me Evan and Sarah sued for guardianship, citing Sarah, Vernon, Fletcher, and Dr. Norton. I decided to confront Fletcher, suspecting they had bribed him. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Pott, Fletcher said in the pharmacy, the smell of antiseptic and the cold neon light like suburban fog. Your daughter-in-law visited a few weeks ago, saying she was worried because you were acting strange. I told her you only bought vitamins and occasional aspirin with no regular prescriptions, but she insisted that was a sign you weren't taking care of your health. Mr. Harlan intervened, his voice sharp as a blade cutting through the pharmacy air. Mr. Fletcher, did you sign any documents? She gave me a document saying I was confirming Mrs. Thompson's irregular purchases of medication. I thought it was for health insurance. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit targeting the Thompson Trust and the apartment money. My pharmacist was tricked, his mask falling like shattered glass under the Ohio sun. Sarah's manipulation was like a thread weaving through the suburban blinds, knowing no bounds. Mr. Fletcher, I said, my voice firm as a clicking lock, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no issues with medication. Of course, Mrs. Thompson, I'm truly sorry for the misunderstanding, he replied, his voice shaking like dry leaves on the porch, his hand clattering a bottle of pills onto the counter. Leaving the pharmacy, we drove to Mr. Vernon's house. I knocked, and he opened the door, his gaze hostile, like a white suburban fence erected between us. Mr. Vernon, Mr. Harlan said, his voice cold as the Ohio wind, I understand you signed a statement concerning my client's behavior. That's right, he growled, his voice like gravel grinding under tires. She's lost it. installing cameras like she's in a war zone, strangers coming and going, yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Vernon was twisting everything, like Sarah's fog of manipulation. "Mr. Vernon," I said, my voice calm as the Ohio afternoon sun, "do you know why I installed those cameras? To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house and threatened me." "That's the talk of a crazy person," he snapped, his voice like an alarm siren cutting through the suburban night. There was no reasoning with him. His testimony was based on malice, likely instigated by Sarah. That evening, Mr. Harlan and I sat in the living room, the yellow light illuminating the dining table like the light of the law. "Emily," he said, his voice firm as oak, "we need our own psychological evaluation. Dr. Clara, a colleague of mine, is an expert in competency evaluation. She can confirm your lucidity. What if Evan and Sarah bribed the judge? The legal system is not perfect, but it is not entirely corrupt. We have solid evidence of your competence and their greedy motives." The next morning, I met with Dr. Clara, a woman in her 50s, her eyes kind but sharp as an ancient suburban oak. "Mrs. Thompson, I will ask you about your memory, reasoning, finances, emotions, and conduct a cognitive test. Please stay calm and answer honestly." For 2 hours, I answered questions about dates, solved logic problems, managed a budget, and recounted my feelings when Evan excluded me from his wedding. The sound of her pen scratching on paper was like the rhythm of my heartbeat. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice warm as a suburban fireplace, "your results are far above average. Not only are you competent, but your cognition is excellent." "Doctor, why is my family doing this?" I asked, my voice choked like the night wind. "Based on your account and the documentation, this is elder financial abuse, targeting the Thompson Trust and the apartment money. It is more common than people think," Clara replied. I left the examination feeling relieved but pained, like the Ohio sun piercing through the clouds. The confirmation of my competence was a victory, but the lawsuit was a real wound. That afternoon, Mrs. Evelyn convened her garden club friends. When I told them about the lawsuit, everyone was outraged, their murmurs like rustling leaves. "Emily," Maria said, "we will testify. We see you every week. Everyone knows you are of sound mind." "More than sound mind," Jenna added, her voice ringing like a wind chime. "You're more lucid than many 40-year-olds I know." Alfreda took my hand, her touch warm as the Ohio sun. "Emily, what your children are doing is not new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents incompetent to take their money. But you have documentation, a lawyer, and us." Her words were like a porchlight, igniting hope. I was not alone. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation, from money with legs to a person living for herself. "The saddest thing," I said, my voice trembling like an autumn leaf, "is that Evan and Sarah destroyed every chance for reconciliation for money. I can't go back." "And that is a good thing," Jenna replied, her voice like a breeze. "You know who they are, and you can protect your freedom from Ohio to Paris." That night, I truly wept, not out of sadness but out of grief, like bidding farewell to the son I thought I had, the dream of a loving family. But a steely determination rose up, like the oak standing firm against the Ohio wind. I would not let them steal my money, my dignity, or my freedom. The freedom to paint, dream of a Paris ticket, and live for myself. The court hearing arrived 3 weeks later. I woke up early, put on a black suit, and looked in the mirror with a resolution sharp as a fog-cutting blade. Today, not just my competence, but my dignity, my right to live without abuse, and my value beyond a bank account were on trial. Mr. Harlan arrived at 7 a.m., reviewing the strategy, his voice firm as a hammer blow. "Emily, the burden of proof is on them. They must prove you are incompetent. We only need to show you are lucid. What if the judge is biased? Judge Miller is fair, prioritizing the rights of the elderly." We arrived at the courthouse at 9 a.m. In the hallway, Evan wore a new suit, likely bought with borrowed money to sue me. Sarah wore black, as if attending the funeral of the family relationship. Evan looked down, avoiding my gaze, but Sarah looked cold, like a business transaction. Their lawyer, an older, well-dressed man, exuded the confidence of someone who had won similar cases. "Your Honor," he said, his voice solemn as a suburban church bell, "Mrs. Emily Thompson is exhibiting mental decline. She cut off family support unreasonably, installed cameras out of paranoia, and isolated herself from relatives under the influence of a neighbor and a self-serving lawyer. Every word turned my autonomy into madness, my freedom into manipulation, like Evan and Sarah's fog of manipulation. Sarah took the stand, performing like a Hollywood star, tears rolling down as she described me as completely changed, hostile, and paranoid. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling like dry suburban leaves, "Emily was like a second mother to me. It is truly heartbreaking to see her decline. We just want her to be cared for." The tear-wrapped lies were convincing. Mr. Harlan cross-examined, his voice sharp as a razor. "Miss Brooks, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" "We always talked about many things," Sarah stammered. "A specific date?" "I don't recall." "Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client?" "It was a small ceremony." "Is it true that you said your mother-in-law was not special?" Sarah's face flushed like a ripe apple under the Ohio sun. That statement was misunderstood. How should it be correctly understood? She remained silent, the cracks in her manipulation showing. Evan took the stand. I watched my son swear to tell the truth while preparing to lie about his mother, the sharpest stab of my life. "Your Honor," Evan said, his voice like a legal script, "Mrs. Thompson has always been generous, but recently she has been erratic and unreasonable. We believe she is being manipulated by those taking advantage of her." Mr. Harlan cross-examined, his voice firm as a rock. "Mr. Thompson, did you withdraw $45,000 from your mother's account over 4 years?" "Those were family gifts," Evan replied. "Do you have any documentation stating they were gifts?" "No, but she always helped." "Is it true that your mother cut off support because you and your wife tried to pressure her into signing a power of attorney?" Evan hesitated, his eyes darting like a wild animal, the fog of manipulation slowly clearing. When Mr. Harlan cross-examined Evan, my son's mask completely fell, like suburban curtains torn open under the Ohio sun. "Mr. Richter," Mr. Harlan asked, his voice sharp as a blade cutting through the courtroom air, "in the past 4 years, how much money did you receive from your mother?" "I don't recall the exact amount," Evan replied, his voice wavering like rustling dry leaves. "Was it approximately $45,000? "Perhaps. She was always generous." "And how many times did you visit your mother without asking for money?" The silence was heavy, like the echoing sound of a suburban church bell. "Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's home without permission and searched through her private papers?" "We were worried about her." "Is it true that you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney?" "We just wanted to help her manage her finances." "At 35, do you need your 68-year-old mother to pay off your car loan?" Evan could not answer with any dignity, his eyes downcast as if avoiding the legal sunlight. Mr. Vernon testified about my eccentric behavior, but when Mr. Harlan requested details, he admitted he had never spoken directly to me, all based only on superficial observations, like looking through a white suburban fence. Dr. Norton declared that my refusal of a psychological evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Harlan presented documentation from Dr. Clara, completely refuting his conclusion, like light driving away darkness. Then it was our turn. Mr. Harlan called Mr. Fletcher, my pharmacist, who explained he was tricked into signing a document that misrepresented my medication-buying habits, his voice trembling like leaves under the Ohio wind as he apologized. Clara testified about my excellent mental state, presenting the results of a perfect cognitive test, like a clear picture on a legal canvas. Mr. Ellis from the hardware store confirmed my lucidity, explaining that my decision to cancel the automatic transfer was entirely reasonable and properly handled. Mrs. Evelyn and her friends from the garden club testified about my clarity of mind, my newfound vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Their words warm as the suburban afternoon sun. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up and walked to the witness stand, with dignity, feeling the weight of 68 years of experience, wisdom from pain, and strength from adversity. Like the oak standing firm against the Ohio wind. Mr. Harlan guided me to tell the whole story. The $45,000 spent over 4 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the relentless emotional manipulation, the invasion of privacy, and the legal threats. "Mrs. Thompson," Harlan asked finally, his voice ringing like a court bell, Why did you stop providing financial support to your son and daughter-in-law? Because I realized what I received from them was not love, I replied, my voice clear as sunlight piercing through the fog. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but my person was not. I was not buying love, I was buying peace. Do you regret that decision? I only regret that it took me too long to decide. Evan's lawyer tried to make me look confused during cross-examination, but I answered every question with clarity and precision, like a paint stroke on a canvas. When he implied my new friends were manipulating me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect, not financial gain. In his closing argument, Evan's lawyer insisted I was a victim of outside manipulation. Mr. Harlan countered, his voice like a hammer hitting oak. Your Honor, this is not a case of an elderly woman losing her competence, but a woman finding the strength to escape years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs presented no real medical evidence of incompetence. What they have shown is their disappointment that their source of income decided to exercise her legal and ethical right to protect her own assets. Judge Miller took a recess for 2 hours to deliberate, which felt as long as 2 years, my heart pounding like the clock in a suburban living room. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear, like the Ohio sun after a storm. After reviewing all the evidence, he began, his voice ringing like a church bell. The court finds that Mrs. Emily Thompson is fully mentally competent. The professional psychological evaluation confirms her cognition. Her financial decisions, however painful to her family, are entirely reasonable and within her rights. My heart raced faster, like the rolling Ohio River. Furthermore, he continued, the evidence shows this lawsuit stems from financial self-interest, not genuine concern for Mrs. Thompson's well-being. Camera footage proves the plaintiff's illegal entry, violating Ohio law, justifying the 100-yard restraining order. The court entirely dismisses the request for guardianship. I won. Not just the lawsuit, but my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live without abuse from the people who were supposed to love me. Leaving the courthouse, I saw Evan and Sarah talking angrily with their lawyer, their voices echoing like distant car horns. Sarah looked at me with hatred before walking away, like darkness retreating from the suburban light. Evan looked at me one last time, and for a second, I glimpsed what might have been regret, but it was too late. That evening, Mrs. Evelyn hosted a celebration at my house with friends, the laughter and clinking glasses like suburban wind chimes. Emily, Alfreda said, her voice as wise as the ancient oak, today you didn't just win the lawsuit, you won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was entirely mine. I could travel, love, create, and live without fear, guilt, or manipulation. 3 months later, I sold the suburban house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center, the city lights twinkling like Ohio stars. I donated half the money to organizations protecting the elderly from family abuse. I named the fund the Thompson Fund for Elder Independence, to protect people like me. With the other half, I began living the life I always dreamed of, traveling Europe, taking art classes, and joining a volunteer group. I no longer heard from Evan and Sarah. Others said they had moved to a smaller apartment, and Sarah was working for the first time in years. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity could not, the value of honest labor and independence. One night, standing on my new balcony, looking at the sparkling stars, I thought about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing she had to buy love. That woman was dead. In her place was someone who understood a fundamental truth. True love is priceless, and freedom is never too expensive. 3 months after the court victory, as I was preparing for my trip to Europe, Mr. Harlan called with a serious tone. Emily, I just received news from the police. They found a 73-year-old woman in New Jersey, Mrs. Janet. Sarah was her caregiver 2 years ago, tricked her into signing a power of attorney, and disappeared with $45,000. My heart clenched. Sarah wasn't just targeting me. She was a professional predator. 6 months later, in Paris, my phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Mrs. Thompson, we've investigated further. Sarah Brooks is actually Samantha Wright. She has 3 felony convictions for elder fraud in Florida, Arizona, and Texas. She targeted Evan from the beginning because she knew he would inherit a large estate from his mother. I remained silent, looking at the sparkling Seine River. Part of me wanted to believe my son was also tricked, but the rest of me clearly remembered Evan's gaze when he asked me to sign the power of attorney. It wasn't the gaze of a victim. It was the gaze of an accomplice. "Detective Rodriguez," I said, my voice hard as steel, "I will fly back to New York next week, not just to testify, but to ensure Sarah and all her accomplices pay the price. Mrs. Janet, the other 4 victims, and I, we deserve justice." I hung up, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not to let go, but to ensure this story is told so no one else has to go through what I did. I am Emily Thompson, 68 years old, and I just learned the most important lesson. Freedom is not just the right to live for yourself. It is also the responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. 6 months later, Paris. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. This time I answered. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Evan." I remained silent. "Mom, I'm at a rehab center. Sarah, she didn't just trick you. She tricked me too. I've lost everything. The house, the car, the job. But I think maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice was shaking. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know. I'm sorry, truly." I looked out at the sparkling Seine. Part of me still loved the little boy I used to hold when he had nightmares, but that boy died a long time ago. "Evan," I said finally, "if you are truly remorseful, do one thing for me. Become the man your father hoped you would be. Not for me, but for yourself." I hung up. Maybe one day we will talk again, or maybe not, and that is okay too. Emily Thompson still lives in Paris and runs the Thompson Fund. Evan completed a counseling program to recover from the toxic relationships and his complicity. He admitted that losing everything was a necessary, painful lesson to wake up. He now volunteers at an organization supporting the homeless as a way to atone for his mistakes and find himself again. Sarah Samantha Wright is serving a 23-year sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. She was convicted of 7 counts of elder abuse, involving a total of 6 victims and nearly $1 million. They haven't met again. But some stories don't need a happy ending. They just need the right ending. Emily walked out of the courthouse with victory in hand, but her heart was still bleeding from an irreparable loss. If this story makes you believe that all seniors deserve to live in safety and respect, please subscribe. Your action today will help us continue to light the flame of hope, so that every story we tell next can become a life raft for someone drowning in loneliness and despair. After all, do you think Evan has sufficiently atoned, or should Emily cut off this relationship completely? Comment now to share your perspective.